welcome back to Homestead in Bloom. I'm Kaylin and I'm so happy you're here. Today we've got a really fun video because I'm going to be showing you some of my favorite Christmas or cozy sweet recipes. So the first one I'm going to be showing you is a sourdough cinnamon roll, and this recipe actually comes from the blog Farmhouse on Boone, and so they are so delicious, and I will link her recipe down below, that way you can follow along. They are just so yummy, and every time I make them I get so many compliments, so I wanted to just share me making them with you. And then the next recipe we're going to go over is a apple pie recipe. I'm not going to show the pie crust, so you can just do whatever pie crust recipe is your favorite, but I am going to go over the apple pie filling. And so we'll do that together, and this recipe is super easy because you don't have to like cook your apples or anything. You just slice them, mix your spices together, and then put it into your pie crust. So it's very quick and one of my go-to recipes. And then you need to stay tuned for the end because I'm going to be sharing a cookie recipe. It's a shortbread cookie, and it is only 3 ingredients, and it comes together in like 20 minutes, and they are going to be the perfect cookies to decorate for Santa Claus. And so I feel like this video is going to kind of cover all the bases with your breakfast for Christmas. You can have some sourdough cinnamon rolls, and then at Christmas dinner you can have an apple pie, and then cookies for Santa. That's covered as well. So stick around. I hope you enjoy this video, and I hope it is just something fun to watch. And if you make any of these recipes, I would love for you to share. My Instagram is at Homestead in Bloom, so feel free to take pictures of your sourdough cinnamon rolls or your cookies and share them with me on there. I would love to see it. So let's go ahead and get started. So for the sourdough cinnamon roll recipe, I'm going to be mixing the dough together tonight and then letting it ferment overnight, and then adding some more ingredients tomorrow to go ahead and mix the dough. So the first thing I'm going to be adding is half a cup of active sourdough starter. So in order to get your active starter, you want to feed it like 5 to 8 hours before you plan on using it. So I went ahead and fed mine at lunch, so it'll be ready to go. And then you're going to be needing 4 cups of flour, half a cup of honey, but I like to use maple syrup just because that's what I have on hand most often, half a cup of water, 2 eggs, half a cup of coconut oil melted. And you're just gonna mix all of that together until it passes the window pane test. So basically what you're looking for is you want the dough to be mixed enough to where whenever you pull it up to kind of stretch it, you can see through it almost, but it doesn't break. So you just want a very elastic dough that really lets you work with it and move it around. This recipe says that you can do this by hand. However, before I got my mixer, I did it by hand, and oh my goodness, I thought that I was pretty strong, but I had to move it to my dining room table so that I could like put my body weight on this dough just to knead it as much as it needed to be kneaded in order to make it pass the window pane test. So you can do it. However, it's very nice to have the dough hook on the KitchenAid mixer. So if you have that, good to go. If you don't have that, you can still do it, but you are gonna have to put a ton of elbow grease into this recipe. So for this sourdough cinnamon roll recipe, it actually calls for the dough to sit on the countertop overnight to ferment. And so we've just mixed together our dough, and in the next clip, you're gonna see me tomorrow morning finishing the process of, stretching and rolling out the dough, adding all of the filling to the cinnamon rolls, rolling it up, and baking it. So fast forward to the next morning, and we are getting the filling ready for our cinnamon rolls. You see here that I've added half a cup of softened butter, 1 cup of brown sugar, and 2 tablespoons of cinnamon. And I'm just gonna mix that together, and let me just tell you, this smells divine. It is such a sweet smell, and I just love the texture that it gets once you mix it all together. So this morning when I woke up, I went ahead and took the cover off of my dough and I put it back into my KitchenAid mixer, and I added 1 teaspoon of baking soda, 1 teaspoon of baking powder, and half a teaspoon of salt. And I let that turn in the mixer just for a little while, and then now we're to the point where it's time to roll it out. So I floured my surface, and now I'm just going to take my rolling pin and try to roll it into a nice big rectangle. You can see that I use my hands too to pull the dough and kind of get it into the shape that I'm looking for, and then I go in with the rolling pin and get the dough thin and just ready to put our filling in. Now it's time to add our cinnamon roll filling to our dough, and I'm just going to use a spatula and spread it around to get a nice even layer all over the dough, and just make sure that I've got all of the edges covered and everything is kind of even. Next, it's time to roll up our cinnamon roll, and I like to make sure that I'm making it pretty tight when I do this and that I'm keeping both sides even. And once you get it rolled up, it's going to be time to start cutting it into each little slice. I like to butter my baking dish before. The recipe on Farmhouse on Boone calls for a cast iron for this recipe. However, I've always used a glass casserole dish just because I feel like I can fit more and it's less crowded, and it's also just more convenient for me. So I'm gonna go ahead and put 3 across, and yeah, they just look so beautiful even at this stage, and once they're baked they just look even more beautiful. I typically make 12 cinnamon rolls whenever I do this recipe, and once I've got all 12 cut up, I'm going to bake it at 375 for 20 to 25 minutes. Once I've got those in the oven, it's time to make the icing that goes on top, and it is a cream cheese icing. So you're going to need 6 ounces of cream cheese, half a cup of heavy whipping cream, half a cup of maple syrup, and then 2 teaspoons of vanilla. This recipe makes a lot of icing, and so it seems like too much, but once you pour it all over the cinnamon rolls, it still kind of looks like a lot, but once you're eating them, you're thankful for all of the awesome icing because it is so delicious. Okay, now that we've got our cinnamon rolls sitting to the side and fermenting for tomorrow, it is time to move on to the apple pie. So let's go ahead and get started. So for this recipe, you are gonna do around 10 to 11 apples, and you're going to want to peel, core, and then slice them very thinly and set them into a mixing bowl because we're gonna be adding our spices here in just a little bit. At this point, it's time to preheat your oven to 400, and then we are going to get started adding our spices to our apples. So the first thing you're gonna add is 3/4 a cup of fine sugar. Then you're gonna do 2 tablespoons of all-purpose flour, 1 teaspoon of cinnamon, and then 1/8 a teaspoon of nutmeg. Now that I have the filling all incorporated, I went ahead and put down my base layer for my pie, and then I'm adding all of the filling into the pie. As you can see, it is very full, but these apples cook down, and so I want to add enough apples to where my pie doesn't sink. I want it to go straight across whenever it's finished baking. So that's why I add so many apples. Before I did around 6, and that just wasn't quite enough to get the look I was going for with the pie. So now that we're all done with that, it's time to get the top layer going. I'm just gonna roll out the dough, and then I'm gonna be doing a lattice for my pie crust. I just love the way that this looks, and it truly isn't very hard. So I always start by doing the smaller pieces on the side of the dough, and I just lay them vertically across my dough. And you can see I'm alternating pieces as I pick them up. And I do that so that I have a corresponding longer piece to go the opposite direction on my lattice. So after I get them going all the way across, I grab one of the longer pieces and I lay it across the middle of the pie, picking up the alternate pieces and then laying it back down on top. So then you go and pick up the pieces that you didn't pick up previously, and then put your next longest piece down, lay those pieces back on top, and you just keep going with that same rhythm for the entire top of the pie crust, and it just creates this beautiful lattice that looks so detailed and intricate, but it's truly not hard. At this point, it's time to go around the edges of the pie crust and just tuck those long ends in and develop that crust layer on your pie. And after I go and pinch the edges, I like to use my palm and kind of press it flat, and then I'll go back over it and create that scalloped edge. Next, we're gonna be covering the edges of the pie crust before we bake. So if you're a fancy lady, you might have one of those little pie rings that you can place on top of the pie crust, and it just covers the edges. However, I am not a fancy lady, and I use aluminum foil because it does the job. It's a little finicky to get on there, but it does work. And so you're gonna be leaving the edges covered on your pie while you bake it at 400 for 30 to 40 minutes. Just keep an eye on it and check to see that it's golden brown and pull it out. We're at the final recipe of the night. We are going to be making some shortbread cookies that only have 3 ingredients. My husband is a huge fan of these cookies. I made them for him and he did a little taste test and was just, in shock that they were so delicious. He loves those cookies that come in the tin. I think they're called butter cookies, and these cookies really reminded him of those. And so yes, he was a big fan and I was as well. So I hope that you enjoy these cookies. I hope that you get your babies in the kitchen with you and make these cookies together and create those fun memories with one another. And then these would also be a great cookie to decorate. So I'm excited to make these with you. Let's go ahead and get started. To make these cookies, you are going to add 2 cups of soft salted butter to your mixer, and then you're going to add 3 cups of flour to that and 1 cup of powdered sugar, and you're just going to mix that together until it becomes a nice and smooth dough. Once your dough is all mixed together, you're gonna lightly flour your workspace and then just dump your cookie dough onto your countertop. Make sure to put some flour on your rolling pin just to make sure that it's not sticking to the dough. And then you're just gonna roll these cookies out and try to get them fairly thin. but I didn't measure or anything. I just kind of went with what felt right. So next you're gonna be getting your cookie cutters, and this would be so much fun for little kids to do, and then you can help them to pick up the cookies from the counter because that part is a little bit tricky. At first I was using my fingertips to pick up the cookies, but then I quickly realized that if I used a spatula, it was much more efficient and it kept the shape of the cookie a lot better. You can see here that I'm just going through and putting all of the cookie cutter stamps in first, and then I'm gonna go and pick up the cookies after. I lined my baking sheet with some parchment paper before putting the cookies onto the baking sheet, and once my baking sheet was full, I went ahead and put it in the oven at 350 degrees for 7 minutes or so. I just kept a close eye on them because I didn't want them to get too brown on the edges, and so I would just pull them right before I thought that they were about to get to that point. Once the cookies were done, I just took them out of the oven and transferred them onto a cooling rack, and I was able to put the dough back together, like the leftovers that were around the edges of the cookies, and I was able to do that 3 more times and get more cookies every single time. So my cookie cutters were small, and I think that's what kind of contributed to it, but it was nice to have a lot of cookies to be able to share with friends and family. Okay, y'all, we are all finished with the recipes for today. I am so incredibly excited to have those cinnamon rolls for breakfast. It truly makes like the most special sweet treat for in the mornings, and this recipe is truly one of the best cinnamon rolls I've ever had. So you will definitely not be disappointed if you try out this recipe, and if you do try it out, please let me know in the comments down below how you liked it. Remember, in the description box, all of the recipes will be linked for you so that you can reference them. And yeah, I look forward to seeing you in the next video. If you stuck around till the end, thank you so, so much. I'm so happy you're here. This is just so much fun for me, and I'm truly hoping that you are enjoying these videos just as much as I am enjoying making them. So I look forward to seeing you in the next one, and I hope y'all have a beautiful, wonderful Merry Christmas surrounded by your loved ones and just all of your family members. So thank you so much, and Merry Christmas. Bye.